You need a shot timer because that which gets measured gets worked on. The Range Tech Timer is the official timer of Active Cell Protection because it is versatile, reliable, feature-rich, and very economical. Check out all it can do at the link below.
Hey folks, welcome back to Suck Less Saturday. I am Neil, your host. I got a surprise here for you. I've got my friend Riley Bowman back from ConcealCarry.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about some other stuff. We've been, in Suck Less Saturday, the vast majority of what we talk about is dry fire and sucking less through dry fire and getting better at that. There's some other topics that we've talked about sucking less, but at the end of the day, I think if you don't go to the range and actually put some of this into practice with live fire, you really don't get a measurement of where you are. So I've asked if you'd come, we talk about some stuff when we go to the range. And I'd like to kind of have you talk about some of the stuff that you do while you're at the range. And he's got something kind of cool that I want to share.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about essentially what is a vision drill, as I see it. I got to give some credit to Matt Little because I think I was starting to understand a lot of this, but he sort of took it to the next level for me in a big way in a little class I was taking with him. And basically what it is my goal with this drill is to get to a level where I'm monitoring the shooting. It's just actually a term from Brian Enos, world champion shooter from way back in the day. And Brian in his book talks about monitoring the shooting, right? And I remember thinking as I read that, like, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? And for me, it was a foreign concept because I was so used to, as kind of a bigger, stronger guy, my thought process with a gun is I'm going to draw this gun, it's going to come out of the holster, and I'm going to muscle it to the target, and I'm going to shoot that target. And then
drive that gun.
Yeah, like I'm in control of this gun. And so what I found is it actually created a lot of tension in myself, physically, but also mentally. And that's not the best place to be when we're shooting, in a place where we're like mentally almost psyching ourselves out or stressing ourselves out. When we want to be able to shoot at our maximum performance level. And so as I started thinking about this and trying to figure out what that meant, especially for me, and then put it together with some great instruction from other great instructors, like I mentioned, Matt Little. So we do this vision drill with students that I teach, and it works really great. And part of the reason we do this is I want to be able to get a shooter to a place where they're monitoring their shooting, meaning that we're simply observers of what's happening in front of us. The gun's in my hand, the target's there, I'm shooting the target, and yes, I'm doing all those things, but the idea is that I should have already put in the time and the effort in dry fire practice and also in live fire practice to where I'm already somewhat proficient shooting the gun. All right, so at this point, I want to just observe that happen. Like, I know how to do it, so I'm just going to watch it happen instead of trying to force the process, and also in turn you kind of are trying to force results. Right? When we think, I'm going to do a sub 2 second build drill, man, that was hard for me for the longest time because I was trying too hard, and what it would lead to is things like trigger freeze.
Yep.
And you get hung up.
Been there.
And then you don't get under the 2 seconds. It's ironic because you're trying to go fast, and in the trying to go fast, you get hung up.
Yep.
And then you actually end up being slower than you otherwise would have been. And it's not necessarily that we are trying to shoot in a relaxed state, because the whole act of shooting I don't think is necessarily a relaxing thing. I mean, there's this explosion and everything's happening in front of our face, right? But mentally we don't want to be so into it, or so focused in on the sights, for instance, or the target, that we lose sight of other important things. So the vision drill is basically this. So the next time you go out to the range, I would encourage you to do this. Start with your gun up on target, okay, and fire a shot. And the goal in that first shot is I want you to see your front sight, in the case of an iron sights, or I want your red dot, in the case of a dot, I want you to see the very moment that it jumps up. Okay. If it stays in the window, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. We just want to see the moment that the sights lift. Okay. And that's a little bit challenging sometimes. I mean, even though it sounds simple to talk about and describe, it actually is more challenging for a lot of shooters than we'd like to think. I know it was hard for me in the beginning. And that's actually the beginning of learning how to call shots, because we are able to call our shots by seeing the exact precise location of where our aiming optical device, whatever it is, iron sights or a red dot optic, wherever that dot or that front sight is on that target in the moment that that shot's fired, that's where the round's going.
Right.
For us to actually see that level of visual information, we need to actually be seeing a lot more than we sometimes do. When we do stressful things, a remarkable thing happens sometimes. Sometimes we actually mentally kind of block out certain things. Okay, so when we know a big bang or a loud boom is coming, it's weird, but it's true. You and I were talking about
yeah.
it. It's real. I've experienced it too, where you think you're looking at your sights and the target, you think you have stuff lined up, and you think you're seeing everything, and your eyes might very well stay open while you fire the shot.
Yep.
But mentally, you just kind of check out, just like a little.
Yeah, they just kind of show. And I had this in dry fire when I first started shooting seriously 3 years ago. I noticed in dry fire, and I asked a few people, and at that point nobody that I talked to knew about this or could really walk me through it. But I would press my gun out, and I was so used to this happening in live fire that it happened in dry fire. But now I was able to notice it, right? Because when the gun's not going bang and there's all the chaos of everything else going on, I would press out, pull the trigger, and my eyes would just blur for that split second, like they were waiting for I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like your gun is there one moment, you fire the shot, and then
yeah,
it just kind of comes back.
Yeah.
Like you don't see a lot of the stuff that happens in between, right?
And so, so John and I talked about this at length because he was like, he had not really heard of this, and so and I'm like getting great scores with my Mantis, and this was really when I started getting into it with the Mantis, and I was getting great scores, but I'm like, man, it's weird, and we talked about it back and forth a little bit, and his answer to me was stare at something through your sights and maintain that focus, worry less about your score and all that kind of stuff, and push through that. And now, at some point it went away. I couldn't tell you when, where, or why, but at some point that went away, and now I don't have that anymore. But so if that's something that happens, I don't know that everybody even knows about this or realizes, or maybe just thinks that's just normal. It's normal to blink when I do it, or it's normal for that.
Well, that's the
thing.
truth. It actually is normal.
For sure it is.
Yeah.
But it's better if you don't.
That's right.
I mean,
so an example I use when talking about this kind of thing is a lot of times is talking about frame rates, like what we have with cameras, right? When we're filming at like say 30 frames per second, we get a very standard normal, like what we're filming on probably right now.
Sure.
A very typical looking video that looks smooth, but if we were to slow it down very much at all, we'd kind of see it's a little bit choppy, right? Yep. The more frames that we can get per second in a camera, the smoother we can make things,
right?
And the more we can slow things down and actually see more detail. So I kind of think of this visually with our eyes. It's like most of the time we're walking around, throughout our typical day, living life at 30 frames per second. But the moment you have a little bit of stress added, it might drop to 15 frames per second or 10 frames per second. And so suddenly you're shooting this gun and you think you're seeing 30 frames per second, but you're maybe only seeing 10 frames per second. So you're missing stuff. I mean, a gun cycles faster than that, single frame at that speed. So the goal is actually for us to increase our frames per second, so to speak. So that's what we're talking about here. We want to try to really, and the suggestion you mentioned, like when you mentioned talking with John about it, looking through your sights, focusing on the target, firing a shot, letting it happen. That's a great way to start working through that, because you're sort of taking some of the focus away from the thing that's causing you to kind of blink out or whatever. So the drill is basically come up on target, okay, be on target, fire a shot, and I want you to just see if you can see the moment that your sights jump up. Okay? I don't care what happens after that. I just want you to see the moment it takes off. Okay? Front sight lifting out of the rear sight notch, or red dot jumping up. Okay? Once you start seeing that, it might take a couple of tries. Then I want you to do the same thing, but I want you to be aware of some other object in the foreground. It could be behind the target. It could be on the target, just something else. Maybe you're staring at the center of the target, but there's writing up in the corner or something like that. And so maybe go ahead and do that and just aim at the center of the target, fire a shot. But while you're firing that shot, try to be aware of the fact that there's other details and other things on that target, for instance. And if you can see that and be aware of that, I've even done this where I've taken, like if we have a student on one target, but we have a second target downrange, and I'll go down, I'll tell them not to really look, and I'll just write, a letter or a number or something on that target, and I'll have them then, stay on their target, fire a shot, and tell me if they can recognize what it is, I'll write it big or whatever.
Sure.
And that's kind of a way we can accomplish that. All right. So, okay, you fired the shot, you were able to see more in your environment. And the goal where we're trying to get to is ultimately getting to where we see more things happening as the shot's being fired. So, for instance, I'll continue giving a student other things in the environment. I want you to fire the shot. I want you to be able to see there's an orange cone on the ground, for instance. We're at an outdoor range, let's say.
Yeah.
Orange cone on the ground marking the 3-yard line. We're back at the 7. Shooter, I want you to fire the shot and pay attention to that orange cone. Like your eyes are here, your focus is here. See, a focus and attention is different.
Right. Yep.
So your focus is here, but your attention is, where's that orange cone? All right, great. I've even done it where I've held up, 3 fingers or 4 fingers, my hand or something kind of to the side and asked, did you see my hand here as you fired that shot? Oh, yes, I did. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, let's do it again. Hey, and then they start looking for it. Okay, again, the focus is here, the attention is elsewhere. And it's not that we're saying that we want our attention to be somewhere other than the shooting we're doing. This is simply a vision drill to allow ourselves to see more of our environment, more of the peripheral, and that's actually going to translate into better shooting.
For sure.
It allows us to monitor the shooting better. So ultimately, I'm going to ask the student to fire a shot, and I want them to see the actual slide cycle on the gun. And then I'll ask, the cool challenge is saying, fire a shot and see the brass case eject out of the gun. And all of you watching, you can do this, all right?
This isn't an advanced thing. This is just a vision thing, right? So this isn't necessarily about bullseye shooting or speed shooting or anything like that. This is about opening up our vision to see more. And ultimately, as I'm following you and maybe taking a step forward here, is that the more you can see, the faster you're going to shoot and the more accurate anyway. Because if we see something, if we see more of everything else going on, we're able to actually focus in probably more and get a better shot anyway. So I was just sharing with him before we did this, as we were chatting about this, is I saw my slide move for the first time, really, that I recognized it in Gabe White's class here a few weeks ago. And I was like, it felt super slow. It felt like everything was going, my frame rate was different. And when you say that, I'm like, whoa, that's exactly what it was. At the time, I thought my gun was dry and I needed lube, is what I thought. But, when I checked it, everything was good. And I was like, you know what? I am seeing more. And until today, when we talked, that's kind of been sitting here in my mind going, what happened that day? I feel like I'm just scratching the surface there of the vision side of things. We all go do the work, or a lot of us go do the work. We do all of our dry fire, we do our transitions, we go to the range and all that kind of thing. But there's a whole nother world out there, and it's vision. Yep. And so
the cool thing is, at all hours of the day, assuming we have normal vision, we're not blind in one eye or that sort of thing, we all see about 170 degrees all day long. Right now, as we're standing here talking to each other, I see the camera off here to my left. It's there, but my focus is here.
Yep.
See what I'm getting at? We see that all the time. It's actually the brain that tells us where to place our attention. So what this is a vision, and it's also an attention drill.
Yep.
And how it translates to excellent shooting, it allows us to access a greater level of visual acuity in the shooting. And also allows us to have a little bit more, we start learning control over where we put our attention.
Yep.
And not only focus. And those two things are actually very important to our shooting.
Oof, that's big.
All right, so some deep stuff there.
Yeah.
But once you start playing with this and you start experiencing it for yourself, it's going to start clicking, and there's going to be things that make more sense to you.
So like we said at the beginning here, folks, we can dry fire all day long to suck less, but ultimately we got to go measure. There's tools out there that can measure that, the Mantis and several others like that, and we love those guys, and that's great. And I'm the shooter I am today because of Mantis. But at some point, you've got to go put live rounds down range and measure there, just to make sure that you're doing everything right and that you're on the right track. So this week, go to the range. You don't need to take 1,000 rounds with you, because I understand ammo is not easy to find. It's not easy to find for us I'm sure it's not for you either,
do
right?
this one drill with less than a box of ammo.
Yeah, you can do this with, with a mag. One mag. Just watch your irons or watch your dot and see it move, and start opening up that peripheral. Start opening up your vision to see more. But while you're keeping, your attention and your focus down there, that's interesting, and it's a great one. Spend a little bit of time in the range, and it's also fun to go to the range.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. But this is also something you can practice a lot of times. Like even when I'm driving, there's times I'm practicing and doing vision drills where maybe I'm staring at the car ahead of me, but I'm then also trying to maybe be more aware of, there's a sign over here, there's a car over there, there's a trash can on the street there. So this is a type of vision drill you can do a lot of different ways. But the real thing we're asking you to do to help you suck less is go to the range and try to practice seeing more as you're firing your gun.
Awesome. All right, guys, go get after it. Suck a little less this week. See you next week.
Yeah.